My son and daughter-in-law removed me from their wedding guest list. Your name isn't here. Get ready for today's story, but first, hit like, share the love, and subscribe to our channel. I've lived a long life, longer than I sometimes feel, and yet there are moments that cling to me like the scent of lilacs in spring. Sweet, sharp, unforgettable. My name is Eleanor Mayfield, though everyone calls me Ellie now, or Grandma Ellie when they remember to call at all. I've watched generations grow like saplings in my backyard, and I've learned that life, in its quiet cruelty or gentle kindness, always leaves us with lessons we didn't know we needed. I sit by my window most days, the light falling across my hands and the soft grooves of my skin, thinking back on the twists of my own story, the things I've seen and felt that never leave you entirely. Sometimes I tell these stories to visitors or anyone who'll listen because telling them keeps me tethered to the world and maybe, just maybe, helps someone else understand a little bit more about love, family, and loss. I never imagined I'd be the kind of grandmother who feels like a stranger in her own family. But life has a way of surprising you in ways you're never ready for. And so, I begin my story not from the first day I held my son in my arms, but from the day I discovered that even love isn't always enough. It was a crisp October morning when I first saw it, my name missing from a list that should have been mine. I was sitting at my kitchen table, the one with the chipped corner that I never bothered to fix, scrolling through the wedding details my son and his fiancée had posted online. They were always organized, the two of them, the way some people can color coordinate every little thing in their lives. I had clicked on the guest list by accident, really, thinking it was just another spreadsheet. But my heart dropped the moment I saw the column labeled Guests Confirmed. I scanned down, expecting to see Eleanor Mayfield, or even just Mom, like I always had been in every gathering, birthday, graduation, and Christmas party. But there was nothing, not a single mention. My stomach twisted. I clicked refresh, still nothing. I leaned back in my chair, trying to steady my breathing, my hands clammy against the worn formica. It must be a mistake, I whispered aloud to the empty kitchen. I told myself that, over and over. I called my son just to be sure. The phone rang twice, and then he picked up, cheerful and distracted. Hey, Mom, how's the coffee this morning? I forced a small laugh. I'm fine. Listen, honey, I was looking at the wedding details, and I didn't see my name on the guest list. There was a pause, a long, heavy pause. And then softly, almost too carefully, he said, "Oh, Mom, we didn't think you'd want to come." I blinked. What do you mean I wouldn't want to come? It's your wedding. I've been dreaming of this day since the moment I held you in my arms. How could you even think I wouldn't want to be there? I don't know, Mom, he said, voice faltering. It's complicated. We just thought it'd be easier this way. Easier. That word lodged in my chest like a stone. I didn't want it to be easier. I wanted to be part of it, to watch him walk down the aisle, to see the joy in his eyes when he met hers at the altar. And yet here I was, removed, as if I were a shadow too heavy to carry along. I hung up the phone and sat back in my chair, staring out the window at the maple tree in the yard. Its leaves were just starting to turn, brilliant reds and golds, a reminder that even beauty can signal change, inevitable, unstoppable. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the ache of being left out, of being excluded from the celebration of a love I had nurtured all my life. I felt a swell of anger. Yes, but deeper than that was a piercing sorrow, the kind that doesn't make noise but settles like fog in your bones. I spent that day in a haze, moving from room to room, touching things, smelling the familiar scents of my home, and remembering. I remembered bringing him home from the hospital, the little blanket I had knitted for him, his tiny fists clenching around my finger. I remembered his first steps, his first words, the pride swelling in me at every small milestone. And now I realized those memories didn't guarantee me a place in the next chapter of his life. I felt invisible, like a photograph left in a drawer, important once but no longer needed. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, letting the warmth seep into my hands, and I whispered to the empty room. Maybe they don't understand, but I do. I've always understood, and maybe that's enough for now. The days that followed felt like walking through fog. I went about my usual routines, but everything seemed muted, as if the colors of my world had dimmed. The mail came and went, bills stacked neatly in a corner. The radio hummed softly in the background, and I moved through it all with a sort of hollowed out patience. Friends would call, neighbors would stop by, and I would smile and laugh when it was expected. But inside there was a quiet ache, a bruised place I couldn't quite put into words. I tried to reach out again to my son, hoping that perhaps a phone call or a careful message might bridge the gap. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long since gone lukewarm. I typed, deleted, typed again. I saw the list. I understand you might have reasons. I just want you to know I love you and will respect your choices. I hope we can talk soon. I hesitated before sending it, reading the words aloud. It sounded polite, too polite, and yet it was all I could manage without letting my hurt pour into it like a flood. I hit send and leaned back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the old floorboards. No reply came that day or the next. And then a week later, an invitation arrived in the mail. Not a personal letter, not a phone call, but a small, formal card with embossed lettering. It was beautiful, delicate even, but my name was absent from the list. I held it in my hands, turning it over again and again, as if a closer inspection might reveal my name hiding somewhere in the folds of paper. It didn't. I think that was the moment it truly hit me. My son and his wife had chosen to erase me from a day that I had been anticipating for years. My heart tightened, and a dull, simmering anger mingled with a sorrow so sharp it made my stomach churn. I remember sitting on the couch, clutching the invitation to my chest, and letting tears fall quietly, like rain seeping into the cracks of a forgotten garden. That night, sleep came reluctantly. I lay in bed, listening to the house breathe around me, every creak and sigh amplified in the darkness. I thought about my son, how I had raised him, the late nights I stayed awake when he was sick, the long drives to soccer games in the freezing cold, the quiet moments after school when he would curl up beside me on the couch and tell me about his day. I thought about his fiancée, a sweet woman I liked at first meeting, smart and full of life. I remembered how proud I had felt seeing them together, how I had imagined myself beaming at their wedding, tears in my eyes, smiling at the start of their life together. And now, none of that mattered to them. In the following days, I tried to understand it. I replayed our conversations in my mind, trying to find some clue, some misstep on my part. Had I been too critical? Too overbearing? Too something? I couldn't pinpoint it. Nothing in my memory seemed to justify this erasure. My son was kind, generous, the same boy who had once climbed into my lap when he was 10 and whispered, "You're my hero, Mom." How had we gone from that to this? I began taking walks in the evenings, the crisp fall air brushing against my cheeks, leaves crunching under my shoes. It became a kind of meditation, a time to breathe and think, to process the wave of emotions that threatened to drown me. I walked to the park near my house, past the swings where little children laughed, past couples holding hands and sharing secrets, and I thought about my own youth, about the days when my life felt expansive, full of possibility, before the weight of responsibility and heartbreak and joy had layered itself onto my shoulders. I remembered my own mother, long gone now, who had always told me that life would not be fair, but it would always be meaningful if you chose to see it that way. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky painted itself in shades of pink and gold, I found myself at the old oak tree by the lake. I sat on the bench beneath it, my fingers brushing the rough bark, and allowed myself to cry again, letting the grief pour out freely this time. I thought about my son and his fiancée and the wedding I would not attend. I thought about my empty kitchen, my quiet house, and the silence that had settled like dust. And I made a decision, one that felt strange but necessary. I would not reach out again. Not yet. Not until I had gathered the strength to face whatever came next, however it came. Days turned into weeks. The wedding drew closer, and I immersed myself in small, meaningful routines to keep my heart steady. I baked bread and shared it with my neighbors. I tended the garden that had been neglected all summer. I wrote letters to friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Each action was a tiny act of survival, a way to remind myself that I was still here, still alive, still capable of creating warmth in the world even when I felt cold inside. And yet, despite my best efforts, the sorrow would not fully leave me. I caught myself imagining the wedding, picturing my son in his suit, smiling at the woman he loved, walking down an aisle without me there to witness it. My chest ached with longing and frustration, a tug of war between love and hurt. I realized then that part of me was grieving not just for the day I had lost, but for a relationship I feared might never be the same again. One Saturday morning, I found myself going through old photo albums, the ones I had carefully labeled over the years. I flipped through pictures of birthdays, school recitals, family vacations. I saw my son as a little boy, eyes bright and mischievous, always reaching for something just out of his grasp. I saw him growing into a young man, tall and strong, carrying himself with the confidence I had always hoped he would have. I saw myself in each photo, too, not just as a mother, but as a witness, a guardian, a woman who had given everything she could. Tears blurred my vision as I turned the pages, but there was also a quiet pride in my chest. I realized that no matter what had happened with the wedding, no one could take these memories from me. No one could erase the years of love, the countless sacrifices, the quiet, everyday moments that had shaped both of our lives. That knowledge brought a strange kind of peace, though it was fragile, like the first frost on a pumpkin patch, beautiful, cold, and fleeting. It was during one of these reflective afternoons that I received a call from my neighbor, Carol. She was a retired school teacher, sharp as a tack, and always had a way of cutting through the noise with gentle honesty. "Ellie," she said, "I don't know if you've heard, but there's been talk. Your son and his fiancée are stressed. Something about the guest list, they're not handling it well." I closed my eyes, leaning back in my chair. "I know, Carol. I don't understand it, really," she sighed softly. "Sometimes, Ellie, people make decisions that seem cruel, but they're not always meant that way. Sometimes it's fear or stress or trying to control what they can't. It doesn't mean they don't love you." Her words settled into me like gentle rain, not erasing the hurt, but softening it. Maybe there was more behind their choice than I realized. Maybe this wasn't just a deliberate snub, but something tangled and complicated that I couldn't see from my vantage point. The thought didn't erase the pain, but it gave me space to breathe, to consider that there might still be hope. The week before the wedding, I kept myself busy with preparations of my own. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, baked my favorite lemon bars, and even sat down to write a letter to my son, not accusing, not pleading, but honest. I wrote about my love for him, my hopes for his happiness, and how much it hurt to be left out. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in an envelope, unsure if I would ever give it to him. The act itself, however, felt like a balm, a way of acknowledging my feelings without letting them consume me entirely. And so I waited. I waited for the day of the wedding to arrive, knowing that when it did, I would be forced to face a choice: to stand back quietly and watch from a distance, or to confront the situation and risk further strain. I didn't know which path I would take, and that uncertainty both frightened and comforted me. Life, I reminded myself, is never simple. It is always messy, tangled, and full of surprises. And perhaps the only way to endure it is to hold on to love, even when it feels like the world is pushing you away. The morning of the wedding arrived with a sky so blue it felt almost cruel, like nature itself was celebrating a day from which I was meant to be absent. I woke early, as I often do before the sun had fully risen, and the house was quiet. The quiet pressed against me in a way that felt almost physical, and I poured myself a cup of coffee, the steam rising and curling like a small comfort I could hold on to. I dressed carefully, choosing a soft lavender dress I had bought for occasions just like this long ago, imagining the day my son would marry. The dress hugged my shoulders gently and flowed to my knees, and as I looked in the mirror, I couldn't help but notice the lines around my eyes, the faint tremor in my hands, the silver that had replaced what once had been dark. Age, I realized, had a way of showing you exactly where life had touched you. And in that reflection, I saw every smile, every tear, every sleepless night I had ever spent caring for my family. I debated for a long time whether to attend. My son's words echoed in my head, gentle but firm. "We just thought it'd be easier this way." But Carol's voice lingered too, the reminder that love sometimes hides behind fear or stress or poor judgment. And so I made my choice. I would go, not to intrude, not to make a scene, but to be near him, even if from a distance. I would witness the day that was meant to be his, and I would do it quietly, with dignity. Driving to the venue, I felt a storm of emotions rising within me. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white, and my chest felt like it had been hollowed out and filled with both longing and sorrow. I tried to calm myself with gentle, whispered reminders. Ellie, you are strong. You are here. You have a right to feel, to love, to witness this day, in whatever way you can. The road stretched before me, lined with trees turning gold and crimson, and with each mile, I felt the weight of my own heart pressing against me, heavy but resolute. When I arrived, the air was alive with laughter and music, the hum of life moving forward, without me at the center. I parked my car at the edge of the lot, taking a moment to breathe before stepping out. I could hear voices, see glimpses of dresses and suits, the sparkle of decorations catching the sunlight. I felt like a ghost hovering at the edge of a celebration that had already begun. I wandered slowly toward the ceremony, careful to stay at the back, careful to remain unseen. I told myself it wasn't about recognition or acknowledgement. It was about love. Love and witnessing it, even if the world had deemed me unworthy of a front row seat. And then I saw him, my son. He looked so grown up, so polished in his suit, his hair neatly combed, a smile that was both nervous and radiant. He caught my eye for a fleeting moment, and I saw the hesitation there, the flicker of something unspoken, a recognition, a guilt perhaps. He looked away quickly, focusing on the line of guests in front of him, the woman who would become his wife standing poised beside him. My chest ached, a tight, almost unbearable pressure, but I reminded myself to breathe. I reminded myself that love wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, persistent, even when unacknowledged. I found a bench at the very edge of the garden, partially shaded by a willow tree, and I sat down, tucking my hands in my lap. From this vantage point, I could see the ceremony unfold, every smile, every tear, every vow whispered into the crisp autumn air. The officiant spoke softly, words about love, commitment, and partnership, and I listened, letting them sink into me like warm sunlight. I watched as my son took her hands, the two of them entwined, and I felt a swell of both pride and sorrow. I remembered holding him as a child, guiding him through scraped knees and heartbreaks both small and large. I remembered late-night talks, quiet reassurances, the way he would curl up next to me when the world felt too big and frightening. And now, seeing him here, I realized that the love I had given him all these years had brought him to this moment. Even if I wasn't meant to be part of it in the way I had imagined, I had been part of it. My presence, quiet and steadfast, had shaped him. That thought brought a small, bittersweet peace. As the ceremony concluded, the guests clapped, laughter and applause echoing through the garden. The couple shared their first kiss as husband and wife, and I allowed myself to smile, even to shed a few tears. I stayed seated as everyone rose to congratulate them, choosing not to intrude, not to claim a place that had been denied. Instead, I remained on the fringe, watching, loving, existing quietly in the periphery. Afterward, as the reception began, I wandered among the gardens, watching families and friends gather, children chasing each other through the flower beds. I overheard snippets of conversation, laughter spilling from every corner, and for a moment, the sting of exclusion softened. I found a quiet spot beneath a pergola, the latticework casting intricate shadows across the stone floor. I closed my eyes and let myself breathe, letting the day wash over me, both beautiful and painful. And then I saw her, my son's new wife, walking toward me with a hesitant smile. I felt my stomach twist, unsure whether to brace for confrontation or embrace. She stopped a few feet away, hands clasped nervously. "Mrs. Mayfield?" she asked softly. "Yes," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "Ellie? You can call me Ellie." She nodded, relief flickering across her face. I wanted to apologize. I know you weren't on the guest list. We we didn't mean to hurt you. There's a lot going on, and we made a terrible choice." I studied her face, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. I felt the familiar swell of love for my son, the understanding that life doesn't come with clear instructions, and that mistakes, sometimes painful ones, are inevitable. "I understand," I said finally. "I do. I've loved your son my whole life, and I'll always want the best for him. That won't change bit, no matter what list you put me on." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she nodded, seeming to release a burden she hadn't realized she was carrying. "Thank you," she whispered. I hope, I hope we can start fresh." And in that moment, I realized something important. Love isn't measured by seating charts or invitations. Love isn't determined by lists or approvals. Love endures, quietly, persistently, through mistakes and misunderstandings, through hurt and fear. It's in the memories we carry, the choices we make, the willingness to forgive and to keep caring even when it's hard. The rest of the day passed in a blur of music, laughter, and celebration. I watched my son dance with his new wife, his joy radiating in a way that made my chest ache and my heart swell all at once. I spoke quietly with a few family friends, shared a piece of cake I had baked in the small kitchen at home, and walked through the gardens, feeling the sun warm my face. It was a beautiful day, a day that had been meant to exclude me, yet somehow I had found my place, not at the center, but at the edge, witnessing, loving, surviving. When it was time to leave, I lingered for a moment, watching the couple disappear into the sunset, hand in hand. I felt the weight of grief lift slightly, replaced by a quiet pride and a profound understanding. Life doesn't always unfold the way we imagine, but even in its twists and omissions, it carries moments of grace. I had been hurt, yes, but I had also been given clarity. I had been reminded of the power of love and of the resilience of the human heart. Driving home, I thought about the years behind me, the memories I had gathered, the love I had given and received. I realized that while the wedding had not gone as I had hoped, it had revealed something essential. The bonds of family are not always obvious or convenient, but they are persistent, enduring, even when unacknowledged. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of all. By the time I arrived home, night had fallen, and the stars twinkled in the crisp autumn sky. I sat by my window, a warm blanket draped over my shoulders, and reflected on the day. The hurt remained, yes, but it no longer felt like a wound threatening to consume me. It had softened, reshaped into a quiet awareness that love, even when tested, endures. And in that silence, in that quiet understanding, I felt something I hadn't in weeks: hope. Not the naive, sparkling kind, but the steady, enduring kind that carries you forward, that allows you to keep loving, keep caring, keep being, even when life has knocked you down. That night, I whispered to the empty room, to the memories of my son as a boy, to the love I had always carried. I see you, I love you, and that will never change. The days after the wedding were quiet in a way that felt both comforting and unsettling. The world went on. People returned to work, children went back to school, leaves fell and were swept into piles, and yet in my home, there was a stillness that seemed to echo every unspoken word, every hurt that had lingered too long. I sat at my kitchen table one morning, sunlight pouring through the window and catching dust in the beams, and I realized that while the wedding had passed, the emotions it stirred were far from settled. I thought about my son constantly, about how he had avoided eye contact at the ceremony, the slight hesitation in his smile when he saw me sitting quietly on the edge of the garden. I wondered what he had felt in those fleeting moments, whether guilt had touched him even briefly, or if he had moved past it entirely, caught up in the whirlwind of new beginnings. I wanted to reach out, to speak the words that had formed and dissolved in my heart for weeks. I love you. I forgive you. I understand. But fear held me back, the fear that reaching out might reopen wounds or reveal my own fragility. Instead, I wrote. Writing had always been my refuge, a way to navigate the tangled threads of life without getting lost in them. I took out my journal, the one with the soft leather cover, worn and familiar, and I began to pour out my thoughts. I wrote about the wedding, the sting of exclusion, the bittersweet pride I felt watching my son marry the woman he loved. I wrote about the memories that had carried me here, the scraped knees, the bedtime stories, the quiet encouragements. And I wrote about the love that refused to be diminished, even in the face of hurt. By the time the ink had dried and the sun had dipped lower in the sky, I felt lighter, as if putting words on paper had lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. I folded the journal closed and placed it gently on the counter. Maybe one day my son would read it. Maybe he wouldn't. But the act of writing had reminded me that love doesn't always need acknowledgement to exist. The following week, I received a small, unexpected message. It was from my son's wife. "Ellie, I hope you're resting. We wanted to thank you for coming, even quietly. It meant a lot to us. Can we talk soon? I stared at the screen, the words hovering like a fragile bridge over a chasm I hadn't dared to cross. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure whether to respond immediately or wait, unsure whether I wanted to meet the space she had extended or keep the quiet distance I had cultivated. Finally, I typed back simply, "Of course, I'd like that." We arranged to meet at a small cafe near the edge of town, one with mismatched chairs and warm lighting, the kind of place where time seems to slow down and conversations feel easier. I arrived early, choosing a corner table where I could see the door. I sipped a cup of tea, letting the steam warm my hands and calm my nerves, and I watched as people came and went, the ordinary rhythm of life continuing around me. When she arrived, my son's wife, Emma, I reminded myself, the woman who had captured my son's heart, looked nervous but determined. She wore a simple dress, soft blue that complemented her eyes, and she smiled cautiously when she saw me. I stood to greet her, and we exchanged a gentle hug, the kind that carries both apology and hope. "I'm glad you came," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Me too," I replied. I wanted to understand. Emma nodded, taking a seat across from me. She fidgeted slightly with her cup of coffee, the warmth radiating into her hands. I know we hurt you," she began. "We didn't think it through. We were stressed, overwhelmed with planning, and well, honestly, we didn't handle it well. I think we tried to make things simpler, but we ended up making it worse." I listened, feeling a mixture of relief and lingering pain. "I understand why you might have felt that way," I said quietly. "But it still hurt, Emma. It hurt to feel like I wasn't part of my son's life in that moment. I've always loved him, and I wanted to be there, not just as a guest, but as someone who has walked beside him all these years." She reached across the table and took my hand. A small gesture, but it carried more weight than words could express. "I know, and I want you to know we didn't mean to erase you. You've given him so much. I see that now, and I hope we can start building a relationship, not just for me, but for us all." Her words settled in me like a warm blanket, comforting but also fragile. I realized then that reconciliation isn't a single act, it's a process, a series of small intentional steps toward understanding and healing. "I'd like that," I said, "for all of us." We talked for hours, sharing stories of my son's childhood, laughing over moments I had thought were long forgotten. Emma told me about their courtship, the excitement and fear of committing to a life together, and the pressures that had clouded their judgment in planning the wedding. I shared memories too, not as a way to lecture or claim authority, but to offer a window into the love that had shaped my son's life. By the time we parted, the air between us felt lighter. The tension softened, though I knew the road ahead would require patience and care. In the weeks that followed, I found myself thinking more about forgiveness than exclusion. The hurt had not vanished, and I knew it would linger like a shadow at the edge of a room, but it no longer consumed me. I realized that love, when genuine, can accommodate both pain and joy, both mistakes and redemption. My son and Emma were young, navigating the beginning of their lives together, and I recognized that their misstep was as much about fear and inexperience as it was about me. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, the phone rang. It was my son. My heart skipped a beat at the sound of his voice. "Mom," he said, hesitant, I wanted to talk about the wedding, about everything." I paused, letting the warmth of his voice wash over me. "I'm listening," I said. There was a long silence, filled with unspoken words and memories stretching back decades. I didn't handle things well. I should have made sure you were there. I wanted you to be part of it, and I let the stress, the planning, and I don't know, pride get in the way. I'm sorry, Mom." The words hit me like a tidal wave, the relief almost painful in its intensity. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, not from sorrow, but from the release of tension I had carried for weeks. "I know, sweetheart," I said softly. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me. I've been hurt, yes, but I've also been loved, and I love you no matter what." His voice cracked slightly, and I could hear the vulnerability beneath the bravado he often carried. "I was afraid, Mom, afraid of messing up, afraid of disappointing everyone. But in trying to control everything, I forgot what really matters. You've always been what matters. Always." We talked for nearly an hour, sharing memories, apologies, and hopes for the future. I realized that my son's words, though belated, were a bridge, fragile but real, spanning the gap that had opened between us. And in that conversation, I felt a shift. Not a complete erasure of the hurt, but a movement toward healing, a recognition that love can survive even when mistakes are made. After the call, I sat quietly for a long time, letting the house breathe around me. I thought about the years I had spent raising him, the countless nights I had stayed awake worrying, celebrating, and guiding. I thought about the wedding, the moment I had almost felt invisible, and the slow, steady process of forgiveness that had begun to take root. I realized that life, in all its complexity, often requires patience, empathy, and a willingness to see beyond immediate pain to the deeper currents of love that run beneath it. In the days that followed, I made small gestures of connection. I sent Emma a batch of homemade cookies with a note that simply said, "For our new beginnings." I called my son just to ask how his day had been, listening carefully, not judging, just witnessing the person he was becoming. Each interaction was a small stitch in a fragile quilt, weaving together threads of understanding, trust, and renewed closeness. One afternoon, I found myself in the garden, tending the last of the autumn blooms. The sun was warm on my back, the air crisp and fragrant with the scent of fallen leaves. I thought about the journey I had been on, the hurt, the reconciliation, the quiet lessons about love, patience, and resilience. I realized that while the wedding had been a painful turning point, it had also been a catalyst for growth, for reflection, for the kind of understanding that only time and experience can bring. And in that quiet moment, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had been excluded, yes, but I had also witnessed the enduring power of love, the way it persists through mistakes, misunderstandings, and fear. I had been hurt, but I had also been given the opportunity to forgive, to reconnect, and to nurture the bonds that truly matter. I looked at the fading flowers, their petals tinged with gold and crimson, and whispered softly to myself, "Life is never perfect. It is messy. It is painful. It is beautiful. And love always finds a way." The weeks after my son and Emma's wedding passed in a gentle, almost meditative rhythm. Life returned to its familiar patterns, but there was a quiet difference now, a subtle shift in the air that I couldn't ignore. It was as if the hurt of being excluded had lifted just enough to let the light in, to allow space for something new, something tender, to take root. I found myself noticing little things again. The way the morning sun streaked through my curtains, the distant laughter of children playing in the street, the smell of freshly baked bread wafting through my kitchen. Ordinary moments, yes, but now they carried the weight of gratitude I hadn't realized I was capable of feeling again. My son began visiting more often, though cautiously at first. I could see the careful way he measured his words, the effort he put into letting me speak first, into giving me space to process. We didn't talk about the wedding immediately, not in depth, but the silences between us were no longer heavy with tension. Instead, they felt like a kind of acknowledgement, a mutual understanding that both of us had been through something difficult and were finding our way back to each other. One Sunday afternoon, he came over to help me with the yard work. The air was crisp, the leaves rustling under our feet as we raked the edges of the garden. He carried the larger piles to the compost, his movements careful but deliberate, while I swept the smaller debris into neat little mounds. We worked side by side, speaking occasionally about trivial things, weather, neighbors, a funny incident at his office. But beneath the small talk was a current of unspoken emotion, a tentative bridge being built one slow, deliberate step at a time. After a while, he put down his rake and leaned against the fence, wiping sweat from his brow. "Mom," he said softly, hesitating, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart," I replied, curious but calm. He shifted uncomfortably. Do you really forgive me for the wedding?" I paused, setting down my rake and meeting his eyes. I saw the genuine worry etched across his face, the vulnerability he often tried to hide beneath humor or confidence. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Yes," I said slowly, letting the word carry all the weight of my love. "I forgive you. It hurt, yes, more than I expected. But I also know that love isn't about perfection. It's about trying, about understanding, about coming back to each other when mistakes happen. I love you, and that hasn't changed." Relief washed over him in a tangible way. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding and gave me a tentative smile. I I don't know what I was thinking, he admitted. I guess I was just so caught up in making everything perfect, in controlling every little detail, that I forgot the people who matter most. You, you've always mattered most. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but this time they were not of sorrow. They were of recognition, of healing, of the quiet joy that comes from being seen, truly seen, and accepted despite everything. I know, sweetheart, I whispered, and I've always known. The conversation lingered between us, warm and fragile, and we returned to our work with a new ease. It was subtle, this shift, a glance exchanged over a pile of leaves, a shared laugh at a squirrel darting across the lawn. But it was real, the kind of real that only comes when old wounds begin to knit together with understanding and patience. Over the next few weeks, I found myself making small overtures toward Emma as well. I sent her a note along with a batch of homemade preserves, simply saying, thinking of you, hoping we can continue building something good together. She responded with warmth and gratitude, a brief message that carried more weight than words could convey. Thank you, Ellie. That means more than you know. One afternoon, Emma invited me to help with some post-wedding photos she wanted to organize. I arrived at their apartment, greeted by the familiar smells of her cooking and the soft hum of music in the background. The walls were adorned with photographs from their wedding, the smiles and embraces captured in timeless frames. I felt a flicker of something unexpected, pride, perhaps, mixed with a bittersweet ache. It was strange, seeing them together so fully, yet also comforting, knowing that my son had found someone who loved him as I had always hoped he would. We sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through albums and envelopes of prints. Emma told me stories about each photograph, the little behind-the-scenes moments that had gone unnoticed. A flower girl tripping on her dress, a groomsman adjusting his tie at the last second, a nervous glance shared between bride and groom just before the ceremony began. I listened, laughing at the anecdotes, feeling the warmth of inclusion settle around me like a soft shawl. At one point, Emma paused, holding a photograph of my son as a child, grinning widely, with chocolate smeared across his face. He was such a handful, she said, smiling. I can see where he gets his stubborn streak from. I chuckled, my fingers brushing the edges of the photograph. Yes, I said softly, and his big heart, too. He's always had that. The afternoon stretched lazily, filled with the quiet rhythm of shared work and conversation. I realized that reconciliation doesn't always announce itself with grand gestures or dramatic apologies. Sometimes it is subtle, a gentle alignment of hearts and intentions, the quiet acknowledgement that despite past mistakes, love remains. One evening, a week later, my son and Emma came over for dinner. I had prepared a simple meal, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and a green salad, but the warmth of the home, the soft lighting, and the laughter around the table made it feel like a feast. We talked about everyday things, work, neighbors, memories of childhood, allowing the conversation to flow naturally without tension or forced attempts at closeness. After dinner, my son cleared the dishes while Emma and I sat in the living room. She poured us each a cup of tea, the steam curling between us like a quiet comfort. Ellie, she said hesitantly, I want you to know, I truly want you to be part of our lives. Not just because of the wedding, but because you've always been important to him, and to me now. I felt a lump form in my throat, a mixture of gratitude and the lingering ache of past hurt. Thank you, Emma, I said softly. That means more than you know. And I want that too, for all of us. I want to be part of your lives, and I want us to build something that lasts, something grounded in love and understanding. She smiled, a genuine, open smile, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief so profound it almost brought me to tears. It wasn't just the words, it was the intention, the effort, the willingness to bridge the gap and nurture the fragile beginnings of a family made whole again. Later that night, after they had left, I sat in my living room, the house quiet and filled with the soft shadows of the lamp. I thought about the journey I had been on, the hurt, the exclusion, the quiet pain of being erased from a day that had meant so much to me. And yet I also thought about the path that had opened afterward, the tentative steps toward reconciliation, the gestures of understanding and love that had begun to heal the wounds. I realized that family is rarely simple. It is messy, complicated, and often painful, but it is also resilient, capable of forgiveness, growth, and unexpected beauty. I had been hurt, yes, but I had also been given the opportunity to witness love endure, to see my son and his wife begin to build a life together, and to find my own place within it, even if it wasn't the one I had originally imagined. The next morning, I found myself in the garden again, tending the late autumn blooms and the first frost of the season glinting on the edges of leaves. I reflected on the subtle changes that had taken place, not dramatic or flashy, but quiet and persistent. Reconciliation, I realized, is much like gardening. It requires patience, care, and the willingness to nurture something even when it seems fragile. The seeds may take time to grow, the soil may need tending, and storms may come. But with persistence and love, life finds a way to flourish. As I pruned the last of the roses, I thought about the lessons this experience had taught me. Life is not fair, not always kind, and not always predictable. People make mistakes, sometimes out of fear or confusion, and sometimes out of selfishness. But love persists. It endures quietly and steadfastly, even when unacknowledged. It is the gentle current beneath every action, every choice, every effort to heal and to connect. And in that quiet realization, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The wedding had been painful, yes, but it had also been transformative. It had reminded me of the power of patience, the importance of forgiveness, and the enduring strength of love. I had been excluded, yet I had found a place at the edge of the celebration. And from that edge, I'd witnessed the beauty of my son stepping into a new chapter of his life. I looked up at the sky, the first stars beginning to twinkle in the deepening blue, and whispered softly, not to anyone in particular, "Life is messy, it is painful, but it is also beautiful. And love always finds a way." Winter crept into our town slowly that year, the kind of cold that settled into your bones even through wool sweaters and thick scarves. The first snow came gently, almost silently, coating the streets and rooftops in a delicate, forgiving blanket of white. I watched it from my kitchen window, steam curling from a cup of coffee cradled in my hands, thinking about how quiet the world had become and how much my own life had changed in the months since that wedding. My son and Emma had grown closer to me in subtle ways, small gestures of thoughtfulness, a phone call just to say good morning, a shared cup of tea on Sunday afternoons. But it wasn't just their efforts. I realized as I stirred sugar into my coffee that my heart had changed too. I had let go of some of the bitterness, softened some of the edges, and learned that love often requires patience as much as it requires presence. It was during one of these quiet mornings that I received an unexpected knock at my door. Standing there, slightly nervous, was Emma, holding a small box wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, and her eyes held that same mixture of determination and hesitance I had come to recognize. "Good morning, Ellie," she said softly. I was hoping you'd let me in for a moment." "Of course," I said, stepping aside to let her enter. The warmth of my house met her, and she sighed in relief, shrugging off her coat. I offered her a cup of tea, and she accepted, holding it between her hands like a shield and a comfort at once. "I wanted to bring this to you," she said, placing the box on the counter. "It's something small, but I thought you might like it." I hesitated before opening it, careful not to assume too much. Inside were old photographs, Polaroids, some faded, some crisp, of my son as a child, moments I hadn't realized Emma had kept. Him splashing in a puddle after a rainstorm, his face smeared with birthday cake, his first attempt at riding a bicycle without training wheels. Tears pricked at my eyes as I touched the edges of the photographs, the paper warm beneath my fingers. "I didn't want you to feel left out," she said softly. "I know the wedding was complicated, and I wanted you to see that we've always remembered you, even if it didn't seem that way." I set the photographs down, my hands trembling slightly. "Emma, this means more than I can say. Really." My voice caught, and I felt the familiar mix of sorrow and gratitude that had been following me for months. "You didn't have to do this, but thank you. It reminds me that love can still find ways to speak, even when words or invitations fail." She smiled, relief softening her features. "I hope we can keep building from here, Ellie. Not just for him, but for all of us." I nodded, and in that simple moment I realized how much healing can come from acknowledgement. From the small, tangible gestures that bridge gaps words alone cannot always span. Love, I reflected, is not just in grand declarations. It is in remembering, in noticing, in holding on to someone even when life grows complicated. Winter deepened, and with it came a rhythm of quiet domesticity that allowed for reflection and growth. My son and Emma began inviting me to more aspects of their lives. A quiet Sunday dinner here, a holiday gathering there. I noticed that each time I entered their world, I felt less like an outsider and more like a participant, a witness to the small, ordinary moments that build a marriage and a family. One evening, as the first snow of December dusted the town like powdered sugar, my son called me unexpectedly. "Mom," he said, hesitating, "can you come over? Emma and we want to show you something." Curiosity piqued. I bundled up in a thick coat, scarf, and gloves, and made my way to their apartment. When I arrived, I was met with the warm glow of their living room, lights twinkling, and the smell of cinnamon and pine drifting through the air. Emma led me to the corner of the room where a small, carefully decorated Christmas tree stood, surrounded by neatly wrapped packages. "It's early," she said softly, smiling, "but we wanted you to see this first." My eyes fell to a photograph sitting on a small easel beneath the tree, a photo of my son and me taken years ago, his arms around me during a winter snowfall. The caption, written in neat handwriting on a card beneath it, read, "To the woman who gave me everything, love, courage, patience, always part of us." I felt tears prick at my eyes as I bent to touch the frame. You didn't have to do this," I whispered, my voice trembling. "But it means more than I can ever say." Emma reached out, squeezing my hand. "We wanted you to know that you're part of our story always. The wedding, that was just one moment. But this is forever." My son joined us then, wrapping me in his arms in a hug that carried both apology and gratitude, warmth and reassurance. I felt the weight of months of hurt lift slightly, replaced by a tender sense of belonging. In that embrace, I realized that reconciliation is often a quiet, patient process built through actions rather than words, through gestures rather than speeches. The winter days stretched on, and with them came more moments of connection. I helped Emma with holiday baking, teaching her the family recipes I had learned from my mother and her mother before her. We laughed at flour-covered aprons and runaway dough, shared stories of past Christmases, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, built a bond grounded in love and mutual respect. One evening, after a long day of baking and laughter, I found myself sitting by the window sipping tea and reflecting on the journey I had been on. The hurt of the wedding, the sting of exclusion, the quiet ache of feeling erased, all of it had been real, but so too was the healing that had followed. I realized that love, patience, and forgiveness were not just abstract concepts. They were lived experiences shaped by time, effort, and intention. I thought about my son, the boy who had once clung to my hand when he was scared, who had whispered secrets into my ear in the dark of night. I thought about Emma, the woman who had stepped into our lives with hope and courage, seeking to build something meaningful despite her mistakes. And I thought about myself, the woman who had learned to navigate the delicate balance between hurt and love, between patience and assertion, between grief and gratitude. As snow continued to fall outside, dusting the world in quiet white, I felt a profound sense of peace. Life, I realized, is rarely neat. It is messy, complicated, and often painful. People make mistakes, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of carelessness, and sometimes simply because life is too complex to navigate perfectly. But love, true, persistent love, endures. It survives hurt, bridges gaps, and grows stronger in the space where forgiveness and understanding reside. And so in that quiet moment, I whispered to myself, to the house, to the memories of my son and the woman he loved. Life is never perfect. People are imperfect. And yet love always finds a way. That winter, I realized, was not just a season of cold and snow. It was a season of reflection, of reconciliation, of learning to hold both hurt and hope in the same hand. And in that holding, I found the courage to continue, to remain open, to love without reservation, and to witness the beauty of family in all its messy, imperfect, and enduring glory. Spring arrived slowly that year, coaxing life back into the trees, the gardens, the quiet streets of our small town. I watched it all from my kitchen window, noticing the subtle green shoots pushing through the last patches of snow. The crocuses braving the morning chill, the sunlight soft and golden as it stretched across my yard. Life, I realized, has a way of moving forward, gently and persistently, whether we are ready for it or not. My son and Emma had become a constant presence in my life, not in a way that overwhelmed me, but in a way that felt natural and grounding. The small rituals we had established over the winter continued into the warmer months. Sunday dinners, shared walks through the neighborhood, occasional trips to the farmer's market. Each moment was ordinary, yes, but ordinary had taken on a new richness, a quiet intimacy that I cherished deeply. One afternoon, I received a message from my son. "Mom, can you come over this evening? We want to talk." There was no hint of urgency, no alarm, just the calm, deliberate tone I had come to recognize. Curiosity tugged at me, and I bundled up in a light jacket, stepping into the soft warmth of spring as I made my way to their apartment. When I arrived, Emma opened the door first, her face bright with anticipation. "Thank you for coming, Ellie," she said, stepping aside to let me in. My son appeared behind her, his usual easy smile tempered with a hint of nervousness. They led me to the living room, where a small bouquet of wildflowers rested on the table, their scent fresh and sweet. "Sit down," my son said, motioning to the sofa. He took a deep breath as if weighing his words carefully before speaking. "Mom, I wanted to tell you something, and I hope you'll hear me." I nodded, feeling my heart beat a little faster, a mixture of curiosity and the quiet anticipation that comes before significant revelations. "I've been thinking a lot about the wedding," he began, his voice steady but soft, "and about how I handled things with you. I know now that removing you from the guest list was wrong. I thought I was trying to simplify things to avoid conflict, but I see that I hurt you deeply, and I want to make it right." Tears pricked at my eyes, not from anger this time, but from the profound relief and gratitude that his words carried. I reached out and took his hand, feeling the familiar warmth and reassurance that had always been there even when unspoken. "I know, sweetheart," I said gently. "I felt hurt, yes, but I also knew that your love for me hasn't changed, and I forgive you." He squeezed my hand, his eyes glistening. "Thank you, Mom. That means everything to me. And I want you to know, we want you to be fully part of our lives, not just on the periphery." Emma nodded, her smile gentle and sincere. "We want you to be part of everything. Holidays, celebrations, quiet moments. You've always been part of this family, and we don't want you to feel otherwise." I felt a swell of emotion that nearly made me speechless. All the months of quiet healing, the moments of reflection, the careful rebuilding of trust and understanding, they had led to this moment. I realized then that reconciliation isn't just a single conversation or gesture. It's a continuous process, nurtured through honesty, vulnerability, and the willingness to meet each other halfway. We spent the evening talking about memories, hopes, and plans for the future. My son shared stories about his early days with Emma, their small missteps, and the lessons they had learned. Emma spoke about her dreams and the ways she hoped to integrate me into their lives, acknowledging past mistakes with both humility and determination. And I shared my own reflections, not as reproach, but as gentle guidance born from a lifetime of experience and love. As the evening wore on, I realized that what had begun as a painful exclusion had transformed into a deeper understanding, a renewed closeness that was more meaningful than any wedding invitation could have conveyed. The hurt had not been erased, but it had been woven into a larger tapestry of love, forgiveness, and resilience. Weeks later, my son called me again with another invitation, this one different. "Mom, we're planning a small family gathering next month," he said. "We'd love for you to come. Not just as a guest, but as part of the celebration. We want you there for everything, the laughter, the stories, the memories." I felt a warmth spread through me, a quiet affirmation of all the healing that had taken place. "I'd love that," I said softly. "I can't wait." The day of the gathering arrived with sun-drenched skies and the gentle hum of spring in the air. I prepared my home as I always did, choosing dishes that had been family favorites for generations, baking breads and pies with care, and arranging flowers in simple vases around the table. I wanted the day to be welcoming, warm, and full of the ordinary comforts that make life feel like home. When I arrived at their apartment, I was greeted with hugs, laughter, and the soft warmth of inclusion that I had longed for during the wedding. My son and Emma led me inside, showing me the small details they had arranged, photographs of family moments from the past, little touches that acknowledged my presence and importance, and even a handwritten note from Emma that simply said, "For Ellie, with love and gratitude." As we sat down to eat, the conversation flowed naturally, filled with laughter, stories, and gentle teasing. I listened to the children in the neighborhood outside playing, the clink of dishes, the murmur of voices, and I felt a profound sense of belonging. I realized that family is not defined solely by presence at a single event, but by the consistent, patient weaving of connection, love, and understanding over time. After dinner, we moved to the living room, sitting on the floor with cups of tea and blankets around our shoulders. Emma suggested we look through some old photo albums together, and we laughed and reminisced over images of my son as a child, his first school recital, the chaotic holiday dinners that had once seemed overwhelming. I shared anecdotes, sometimes exaggerated for effect, sometimes tender and true, and Emma and my son listened with rapt attention, filling in details I had long forgotten. In that moment, I realized the depth of what had been healed. The wedding had been painful, yes, but it had also been the catalyst for a greater understanding, a recognition of love's persistence even through mistakes and misunderstandings. I understood that exclusion, while deeply hurtful, had not diminished the bonds that had been built over decades of care, attention, and unwavering presence. As the evening waned and the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I had been hurt, yes, but I had also been given the opportunity to witness forgiveness, to see love endure, and to reclaim my place in my son's life in a way that was perhaps even more meaningful than if I had been included from the start. Later, as I walked home under the quiet glow of streetlights, I reflected on the journey I had been on. Life, I realized, is rarely linear or simple. It is messy, unpredictable, and often painful. People make mistakes, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of pride, and sometimes simply because life is too complicated to navigate perfectly. But love, true, enduring love, finds its way through. It survives hurt, bridges gaps, and strengthens with patience, forgiveness, and the courage to remain open. Back in my home, I settled into my favorite chair by the window, a warm blanket draped over my shoulders. The night was quiet, filled with the soft hum of distant traffic and the occasional rustle of leaves in the gentle spring breeze. I thought about my son and Emma, about the wedding that had once seemed like a wound too deep to bear, and about the quiet, persistent healing that had followed. I realized then that love, family, and forgiveness are not events, they are processes. They are the cumulative effect of countless small gestures, moments of vulnerability, and the decision to remain present even when it is difficult. And in that realization, I felt a profound peace settle over me. The kind of peace that comes not from perfection, but from understanding, resilience, and the enduring presence of love. I whispered softly to the quiet room, to the memories of my son as a child, to the woman he had chosen to marry, and to the life we were all building together. Life is never perfect. People are imperfect. And yet love always finds a way. And in that quiet, intimate acknowledgement, I felt a final, deep sense of closure. The wedding, once a source of hurt and sorrow, had transformed into a testament to resilience, understanding, and the enduring power of love. I had been excluded, yes, but I had also been woven back into the fabric of our family in a way that was real, enduring, and profoundly beautiful. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the evening and the quiet strength of love wash over me. The journey had been painful, but it had also been healing, revealing the depth of human connection and the ways in which love persists, even in the face of mistakes, misunderstandings, and hurt. And as I drifted into a peaceful sleep, I carried with me the knowledge that no matter what, love endures. And that is the most precious gift of all.